You know where you are!
This is Appetite for Distortion.
Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion. My name is Brando, episode number 420. 420,
420.
man. Took up. It's legal in New York. I just had to have a doctor's appointment to get my medical license again. So
Wow.
Medically, I'm not, but if I sound like if I forget what I'm talking about with you today, Mr. Todd Kerns, it's not because of that. And I was just talking to you about this off the air. The last two nights I've had to go into work where I normally work from home in my studio here in Queens. I had to go into Midtown for the iHeart Music Festival to do the radio broadcast of that. So I had to make sure songs and interviews, none of that had curses and just
Oh man. And then you've got like probably a challenge sleeping schedule with a baby in the house and all that stuff too. Yeah. So
yeah. So just to get a babysitter, the hours that me and my wife work last minute because I had to fill in for somebody, and then like I got as soon as I come home at like 2:00 in the morning. Well, this will tie in a few things. I get home around like 1. The cats are obsessed that I'm home now, so they want my attention. I'm up
and
with
food.
them and food.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just had to give my guy treats just to calm him down, so he's not bothering me.
Of
During
course,
the interview.
yeah.
And I lie down at 2 in the morning. Okay, all right. Cats are fed. I'm tired. Baby starts crying.
Oh sure, yeah.
All right, I'll feed him. Whatever. So
it's probably the only thing akin to being like a volunteer fireman or something, where it's kind of like you're constantly like on hyper alert, and if there's a second where you can close your eyes and just kind of nod off, you should do that because it's babies are sort of like you just don't know what's going to happen.
Mr. Harrison Rex, or as I don't know if you know the nickname I've given him, which some people believe is his real name, Baby Brownstone. I did not name him Brownstone.
I like it though. That would be a really cool name.
Because by the way,
we just call him Brownie.
Call him Brownie. That's kind of funny. And this ties into something because who I want to give the person credit, because sometimes people come up with weird names. And this person asked me where you came up with the middle name Dammit.
Well, that's a class. It was never meant to be a middle name until Slash got a hold of it. It was just kind of like Todd Dammit rhymed with God damn it. It was sort of like your classic corny punk rock kind of name that was sort of attached to me, when I was young and sort of hung around. When I came to Vegas, I was sort of, I came from Canada with a career and a background, and but it was really cool to kind of, and I actually I recommend this to people on occasion. I go, what's really interesting is when you go somewhere and all your accolades don't mean a damn thing. I came down and I was like, I'm just some Todd guy, and I'm like, he's from Canada, you know what I mean? And then I just sort of had to go like, okay, well, we would play, and I would just kind of like jokingly introduce myself as Todd Dammit on stage. And then Vinnie Paul from Pantera was at our shows, and he loved it. He'd scream it across casinos, Todd Dammit. And then Slash started introducing me as Todd motherfucking Dammit Kerns, I think is what he would introduce it as. Anyway, it just sort of really caught on. There was a t-shirt, a friend of mine made a t-shirt that just said Dammit. I wore it on the Live in Stoke DVD that we did in 2011, I think it is now. It's crazy to think how long ago that is now. I guess it's 12 years ago.
Wow.
And I just wore the shirt, and people were like, "Hey, where do I get that Dammit shirt?" I go, "This is the only shirt." And then we just started making shirts, and that sort of turned into a whole other thing. So yeah, it's a bizarre thing how, again, organically things just kind of like go, And then now it's sort of like people will say to me, "Do I call you Todd Dammit Kerns, or do I go, my name's Todd Kerns, so don't worry about the other." It's more of a joke that just keeps going on and on and on. To be a grown ass man with a Well, I always say that. It's like all my friends with, grown ass men with names like Slash and Duff and, yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect. So I'll give that credit to Rob Olden, who asked why your parents
Ah.
chose Dammit as your middle name. He said that
Yeah.
jokingly with a laughing emoji, of
Fred
course.
and Wilma Dammit, they decided they were going to call me.
And Todd, speaking about play on words, Todd returns to the podcast. Returns.
Rekerns. There you go. I'm
Yeah,
returning.
you were one of my early guests, episode 46 back in
Holy cow.
2000. Yeah.
So and you've done 420. That's insane, man. That's a lot of hours.
I know. So we delve back into your history, Age of Electric there.
Yeah.
So people want to go back and listen to your story. We don't need to rehash that kind of, part of Todd's life.
This
And
is
also,
the sequel.
this is the trilogy because you came on again.
That's right. I did.
I forgot about this with our friend
Yeah.
Brandon Fields.
Oh yeah, we did the minefield thing. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, of course, because we forget everything when it was during COVID, during the lockdown. Right?
And it came out like about 2 years ago, right?
2 years. We just I think 2 days ago was the 2-year anniversary. I think is what it was. Yeah, which was clearly just a straight up, sitting at home watching Tiger King, and then Matt and Jeremy from Ace Frehley's band. I think they were with Gene Simmons at the time too. Anyway, they were sort of like, hey, we're knocking around this thing with a friend of ours. You want to sing a song? Was what it started off as. And then it was like, yeah, sure. And I go, who's playing bass on this? I don't know. I go, well, I'll play bass on it then too. So it started as a song, Alone Together was the song and the record turned out great. I mean, with no intention of doing much with it. I mean, just sort of like, just some guys just trapped at home making music, and remotely doing it too, which I've done a bunch now. But at the time it was definitely a new thing.
That's so cool. And you're always that's what you're one of my favorite follows in addition to all the cats and the and touring with Slash. It's just like you always have these really cool projects and things that you're working on. And we're going to talk about the fostering cats later.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
But the new project, I would be remiss with Tracy Guns, the Blackbird Angels. So
sure. Yeah.
How did that happen? I mean, I assume you've been friends with Tracy for a while.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because speaking about Minefield, there's 3 different sort of chapters of COVID for me, which was Minefield, Heroes and Monsters with Will Hunt and Steph Burns. Right. Will Hunt from Evanescence, Steph Burns from Alice Cooper, and then the third was Blackbird Angels, which was all sort of in that same 2-year chapter of like, at the time there was sort of people whispering in your ear going like, this is it. We're never touring again. We're never going to be able to do this again. It's totally changed. It's going to be totally, it's weird now from this vantage point looking at it and going, it's basically exactly the same as it was really. I mean, within reason, although there's another wave of COVID happening now, which is going to, cause everybody to probably lock down a bit in their own little worlds. But from a touring standpoint, I mean, I know everybody tries to keep a little bubble kind of happening, but at the time, it was just this sort of like, well, I really didn't believe it. I was kind of like, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's it was bizarre, but it was like, I just kind of felt like, well, if we can't tour and play live, well, we can record and write music. And so we sure the hell did. Tracy, I've known for probably, I would say 15 years in some form or another. I mean, I was a great admirer of, like yourself, I all kinds of rock and roll. But when I became hip to LA Guns, we played those songs in my cover bands as a kid, Sex Action, Never Enough. I'm trying to think of all the songs we did. So that when it came, Tracy came and jammed with us, mostly wanted to jam Led Zeppelin. He loves Led Zeppelin. I mean, we all love Led Zeppelin. Right. That's like saying like, do you like pizza?
Do you like air?
Yeah, exactly. And, and he was very complimentary and, which, always goes a long way from somebody you admire. And when they say, hey, you know what, that was great. And you're great at this. And I'm like, oh, thank you. So the years go by and it's the admiration club of like, he's great. No, he's great. And just kind of like, and sort of sending each other accolades and like just being friendly with one another. And then one day he just sort of reached out during COVID. And it's a funny thing because Frontiers has been sort of known for putting together these super groups.
Yeah.
I didn't know this, but people were like, even with Heroes and Monsters, people were like, so is this one of those Frontiers things where they put, and I go, no, Will called me one day and we just sort of did this. And the same thing happened with Tracii. It was kind of like, I wasn't really that familiar with what, I mean, I'm just sort of largely ignorant to, you know, anything other than what I'm doing.
I get it.
So I just kind of, oh, I didn't realize that was a thing. You know, like Black Swan, friends of mine, like Robin McCauley and Reb Beach and Jeff Pilson, Matt Starr, those guys, they'll put this thing together and they'll make a record. And I go, oh, cool. I just assumed those guys put that together. But then so Tracii just called and, hey, what do you think about making like a like a Led Zeppelin kind of classic hard rock record? And I'm like, dude, let's do it. I'm, like I said, I'm sitting around not doing much of anything. So by all means. So it was really kind of, you know, them sending me music, me sitting in here writing lyrics and making melodies. The other side of it too is, you know, as you know, most people kind of, not most, but anybody who's followed my entire career knows all the things that I do. But there's a giant chapter of people who only know me as the bass player behind Miles Kennedy and Slash. So it's kind of like, it's been really fun for me to be able to get out there and be a vocalist again and to write again and to do all those things that, you know, it really is sort of like reignited an entire sort of thing for me that I'm really happy to get to do, and to be able to do it with someone like Tracii, who I admire. It's been a blast. It's been really enlightening, really.
That's cool. Did he say, I mean, we all understand who have followed your career, why he picked you, but he obviously has kind of like a whole Rolodex of people he could have asked to do the Zeppelin, the hard rock record. Did he say like, why, you know, I like this about you, or was there anything that you connected upon, you know, to make you the duo?
I never even thought to ask. You know, it's sort of like, you know, someone just asks you, you know, I don't know, it'd be like, you know, if some girl asked you out for coffee and you're like, why me?
See, I do that. Maybe I'm projecting. I do that. I always think, what's wrong with you that you want to go out with me?
Yeah, exactly.
That's how fucked up I am.
I just feel bad for you now.
I know.
Why are you asking me? You couldn't find me. No, I think, I don't know. I guess I just, you know, because I've known him, you know, and we'd kind of already been through the whole, you know, admiration side of it, as far as like, I knew he liked what I do, and that was great. And I think that the interesting thing was that Tracii sort of like, he saw through all the kind of like just the bass player for Slash stuff, and he goes, no, Todd's a singer. In reality, we had jammed my band Sin City Sinners that I had here in Vegas with Brent Muscat from Faster Pussycat. We would just jam all the time. We would have George Lynch and you know, Sylvain and Cheetah Chrome or whoever was in town would come and jam with us. And Tracii was one of those guys. Phil was always one of those guys, because Phil was a Vegas guy, so he was always out. Just the other day, like last weekend, we played Secaucus, New Jersey with Tammy Down, Phil Lewis, Sebastian Bach, and Stephen Piercy. And I said to Phil, I go, I barely even had to go over these songs. I go, I remember doing these songs almost weekly with Phil, because we would do, you know, he would just come and jam all the time. We would just do like a whole set of LA Guns. So I'm on top of that, being like, you know, I bought all those records when they came out in real time. So with Tracii, it's just sort of like, you know, when I assume he picked me because he thought I was the right guy for this thing. And like anything else, it's like every time I was sending back, you know, I would sit in here and record a vocal and you know, I would write lyrics and make up melodies, and I'd send it off to those guys, to Steve, to Tracii and Adam Hamilton. So every time it felt like, you know, it could have been an audition that could have gone sideways. If the first song hadn't worked, let's try the second song. You know, by the third time, it would have been just kind of abandoned. You know what I mean? Wouldn't necessarily have been like, this isn't working. It just would have been like, we all would have moved on. But I think from this first song, a song called Mine All Mine, it was sort of apparent there right away, like, this is great, you know. And it's kind of like, send another one. And then we just, you know, just kind of did it 11 times. And then it was kind of like, that's a record, let's put it out. You know, that's sort of how it went. It was really organic and really not like, what's the word? It was not a drag at all, you know, because sometimes making records can be a lot of beard stroking and should this be twice as like, yeah, exactly. I need the beard, but should this be twice as long? Should this be faster? Should this be? And there's a lot of, and sometimes you just get in a room like SMKC4 that we did in Nashville was completely live and really didn't leave a whole lot of room for like, you know, I mean, there was a lot of discussing before we pressed record, but it was sort of like, you know, we just dove in, and that's sort of, sometimes that's a great way to make a record. It's very rare these days, I think, that records are made that way. But you know, this was not quite like that because I'm doing it remotely here. Those guys are in California, and they're just sending me shit, and I'm just kind of like sending it right back. So the fact that it kept kind of like working, I think we just kind of like, cool, let's keep going. And the next thing you know, it's 11 songs, you know. So yeah, it was it's been a real boost, you know, when someone like Tracii comes along and says, I like what you do, I want to see you sing on this thing. It makes me kind of, okay, well, see mom, Tracii Guns thinks I'm cool.
How'd you come up with the name Blackbird Angels? Was that a collaborative? I'm fascinated with band names. I want to go down that road.
I am as well, because it's like, even with Heroes and Monsters, I was really pushing for like Burns, Hunt, and Kerns. Like I wanted it to be like a kind of like 70s prog rock kind of like,
oh,
you know,
not a law office.
or a law office, exactly. But I was thinking of like Beck, Bogart, and a Piece, you know, or
Emerson, Lake,
like
and
that.
Palmer.
Yeah, exactly. Like
okay.
Like a kind of like, because it creates this sort of like collaborative project kind of thing to it.
Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Young.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exact. And Young, sometimes Young.
Sometimes.
But I thought at the time I was sort of like, you know, because you're never sure if this is like just something we're going to record, and the fact that Heroes and Monsters has been touring a bunch, and I'm about to do some more, is kind of like bizarre. So I wasn't sure if this was going to be like Tracii Guns project or Tracii Guns featuring or what it was going to be. And then Tracii just came back with like, what do you think of this? So he sort of thought of it, and I was like, I like it a lot. You know, it's like, it's funny because people go, once in a while, all the Alter Bridge fans are like, did you name it after the Alter Bridge song? And I go, well, there's also a Beatles song from like a long time ago called Blackbird. Right. You know? And they go, oh yeah, right. And I go, yeah, you know, but I thought that, you know, it's pretty evocative, that, you know, the Blackbird Angels, that kind of thing. I thought, you know, it's a funny thing in this day and age to be, you know, I don't know, maybe 60 years into rock and roll and still be sitting there stroking again, you know, like just trying to put band names. I remember when Mother Love Bone came out, I remember thinking to myself, is it 3 words now? Like that's the thing, like, because it's like we've exhausted the 2-word band names that were like Mother Love Bone, which I always thought was a great name, but I never really think about it till after. Probably when I was getting ready to name my next band, I was like, fuck, I don't know. You know, it's like just start throwing words in a jumble and just see what comes out.
Yes.
But it is a bizarre thing that I mean, it's a bizarre thing to imagine, like, you know, just getting together with 3-4 friends and deciding we're going to put a name on it and go play at the local club. And you know, the whole thing just seems preposterous now, you know, from the vantage point of a grown ass man. But but it's also like the most fun, and awesome part about the whole thing is like that Blackbird Angels is suddenly a thing. I mean, I know you're probably going to eventually want to talk about whether we're going to be able to do shows. So that's been something we've been sort of really trying to, you know, try and find that window. Do these windows, like as you know, with Guns N' Roses and Alter Bridge and SMKC, it's like, you know, we're constantly looking for windows, and the windows got really tight when the COVID lockdown happened. It put everything into such a tailspin of everything that was supposed to have happened in 2020 and 2021 just got all kind of you know, pushed back, so that by the time lockdown was over, everybody had all these things that they had to go and do. Not had to go and do, we love doing it, but you know, Slash's commitments to Guns N' Roses were, I can't believe we actually made SMKC4 and we're even able to do that month-long US run that we did, or whatever it was. It almost seems in retrospect that, like, you know, should we have waited? I don't even know, but I never think it's a bad idea to create and to put out music. I mean, it's always a good time to do that. But it was just bizarre. So it's bizarre now trying to. LA Guns is working all the time, like, and in a lot of ways, the last few records they've made are some of the strongest music they've made in a long. I think the fact that Tracy and Phil have really found the chemistry that they've been looking for in, things were, as you know, were really disjointed with that band for a long time. So I've been, their newer music has been really strong, and I think that they, I think they've been really capitalizing on just, a great time for that band to be out and working and playing. And they got a great lineup with Ace and Sean and Johnny. But we are trying to find a moment. And you know what, at this point, because we have a lot of activity coming up in 2024 with our other things. So you never know. That's the beauty of, and it's the funny thing about most bands, and I've been saying this to a lot of my friends. We just did a Sin City Sinners reunion show here. We call it the Original Sin because it's the original four guys. Well, it's not technically the original four guys, but the four guys who play original music. And people say, I can't believe I never thought you'd ever do this again. I go, look, the four guys are still alive. If someone says to me, it might take looking for that window. What about this weekend in 6 months from now? And I go, oh, I'll put it on the calendar, and I feel that way of, like, even the Age of Electric, my band from back when I was a kid. When we split up by 98, 99 after 10 years of slugging it out, and then we just sort of started doing shows in 2015, like right around when Guns N' Roses started doing their reunion stuff. I put out an EP and went on the road, did a reunion thing with those guys through Canada. And it was the same thing. People were like, I can't believe you guys are doing this. I go, well, we're all alive. It's like, if there's a chance the four of us could find, and that's what's so heartbreaking about the death of John Lennon at the time, is we most assuredly would have seen Beatles activity eventually. That's the way I feel about it anyway. Because as long as, other than bands like the Clash that never did, or the Jam that never did, bands that sort of like broke up and never ever got back in a room together. Hey man, not in this lifetime. When hell freezes over, these bands, they find a way back to each other. I mean, it might be a financial thing. Obviously, there's great reasons why Fleetwood Mac, even though they probably hated each other at various chapters, kept coming back together. The Eagles are the best example of guys who just could not stand each other, but somehow managed to find their way. Well, we know how they found their way. Let's be honest. It's like, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, that's like, people ask me about that with Guns N' Roses and all that stuff. Are SMKC going to be, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, who knows? It's like, in a lot of ways, as long as we're all still around, in reality, Miles and Slash could make records together till the end of time. They don't necessarily need me or any of the guys. We have a great chemistry and we have a great thing together. But I think we'll always find, I remember talking about it and just being like, well, we'll always find a time to be like, hey, what are you doing? You want to hang out? Well, I'm not available now, but what about then? It's like, next thing you know, you find yourselves in a rehearsal space somewhere going like, hey, cool, this is fun. It's like, as long as it's fun, as long as you're having fun and you enjoy it, if you really don't like each other, there's a reason why Oasis, bands like that who just never find their way back to each other. But even there, you're kind of like,
never say never. That's how you have Axl
never,
and Slash. I mean, I think that's just the ultimate divorced parents that shows that it
that's
can
the best,
happen.
I mean, and then you've got Duff, who's the pillar of the rock solid person who can sort of keep it all together. I mean, you're like me, and I'm sure like anybody, where I've played with Steven many times, and we all are great admirers of Izzy Stradlin. No one knows where he is or what he's doing, and I think that's kind of part of the beauty of Izzy is. But there's always that ace in their deck, There's always that feeling like you never know. Someday Izzy might just appear, or Steven, or Matt, or Gilby. It's like there's this whole. Somehow I'm a bizarre tiny piece of a tiny branch off this gigantic weird family tree. There's a tiny branch where it's like the Conspirators branch, and it's just like a little twig where
the 6 degrees of GNR bacon. That's what this podcast is, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're one of my favorite branches.
And it's a fun branch. It's mostly coffee and kittens, but yeah.
That's a good band name right there.
Yeah, done. But there you go. That sounds. I would go see that band right now.
I know, and I want to talk to you about your working with Steven, but before I forget, sticking on the band names thing, because I've never heard it said out loud, the SMKC. I've always written it hashtag
Yeah, yeah.
Slash featuring Miles Kennedy and the
Kennedy and the
Conspirators.
Conspirators. Yeah.
Okay, I understand. Like you said, you weren't sure if it was going to be like Tracii by himself or Tracii featuring, and I get like why Slash did Slash's Snake Pit or why people have the brand, right? And Miles, I'm like, okay. I mean, I know Alter Bridge, but Slash is still the marquee. It could have been just Slash, but they went with Slash Miles Kennedy. That could have been it also. But then they went with the Conspirators. So it's a mouthful. So have you ever talked about having a shorter band name? Like, I don't
It's
know,
so
man.
funny. It's such a funny thing because that was an ongoing conversation. Is that I know you probably know, but Slash loves being in a band. I don't think he really had any sort of like purposeful intention of being a solo artist per se. You know, I mean, I think he loves like he's not stoked about like sending tracks back and forth and all that stuff. He wants to be, and I appreciate it because I'm very much the same way. Let's get in a room together, knock it out, and be able to look each other in the eye while we're playing. And like this part, you're playing and it's loud. And is this the chord? Yeah, okay. And you're kind of like, and that's part of the fun of being in a band, So I think that, Slash, the first 2010 solo album, I believe even Slash's Snake Pit was supposed to be just Snake Pit, but I think that there was pressure to be kind of like, you got to kind of like, let people know that it's,
from like the label
Slash's, or something like that. At least that's what I don't know if that's a true story, if it's just something I might.
But I feel like
heard.
that makes sense though. That sounds like a conversation that would happen.
Yeah, even though in reality it was meant to just be a side project at the time, because they were sort of, I think it was in between. I can't remember even like the time period, but and then when it came to the 2010 solo album, when I got involved, it was just Slash, and it was Chris Cornell and Lemmy and Iggy Pop and Kid Rock and all those guys and Miles Kennedy, Fergie, the whole list. And then I think that, he'd always wanted to have a band name. And I know that, and I was, ground zero on that whole thing because, we went in to make Apocalyptic Love in 2011 or 12. It came out in 12, whatever we started recording it. And it was sort of, I was literally sitting with him in his living room and he loves to watch these like, History Channel World War II documentaries, and it was just this giant listings of the next shows coming up or whatever, or you're just looking at the channels basically. And he saw on some World War II thing that said the Collaborators. He goes, that'd be a cool name. No, actually, I'm totally getting this wrong. He had said he wanted to name the band the Collaborators. That's what it was. And I was kind of like, okay, I didn't think it was that cool of a name. The Collaborators sounds like something you see at a Holiday Inn or something. But I remember Fitz being kind of like, Collaborators. He kind of like, just me and him, like, I don't know if I like that. I was kind of like, shut up. Because it's good for us. It's good for us to have a band name.
Shut up.
Shut up. Exactly. Yeah. I just sort of like, it's good for us to have a band name because it sort of makes us, because we're in the photos and stuff like that. He very well could have just put himself, and even just himself and Miles on those photos, because it Slash featuring Miles Kennedy became the sort of touring thing eventually, which was funny because on our dressing room doors it would often say S&M, and I would always kind of giggle to myself. Don't go in that room. But the Slash feature, and I guess Miles being a name and all that kind of stuff made sense for them to put Slash featuring Miles Kennedy. And then when it became Slash featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, it became a real mouthful. But again, it goes back to the same thing of Mother Love Bone. I mean, it sort of becomes harder and harder to come up with a band name that hasn't been used somewhere, or having to buy out some kids from Des Moines who have the name that you wanted to use. Even the name Skid Row existed before. But so, and then the end of the story is I had that backwards. Then we were watching a scroll of shows, and it said The Conspirators, which was a World War II, documentary of some sort. I have no idea what it was about. I go, that's a cool name. That sounds like a punk rock band that never existed. And I remember just kind of looked, and Slash is the kind of guy where it's even funny when you talk about like any suggestion, like say, we've never played Double Talk and Jive, and he'll be like, yeah, kind of like it's just sort of like, he'll look off and he'll sort of quietly, yeah. And then, you know, a little while later, he'll come back and go, so I think we should do double talk and jive, you know, or whatever. He'll just sort of, and it'll be like, you know, he needs to kind of ruminate on it, think about it, and
Marinate.
go, yeah, I think, you know, I think which I think is actually very clever for, you know, anybody who, well, everybody really does not, to just not, you know, act immediately.
No,
so
that's a good practice. Think before you speak,
yeah.
right?
Well, and he is very good at that. But the Conspirators was, you know, like I said, it just went by as a title, and he went, yeah. So the Collaborators overnight became the Conspirators, or like maybe a few days later, whenever. So he just sort of like, yeah, I think the Conspirators is a better name. Or like, okay, boom, you know. Then that record came out, and it's a lot. It's sort of, you know, again, sort of, but I think it sort of separates us in a lot of ways from, because there's nothing funnier than watching Jimmy Kimmel or something. And coming up now, Slash featuring Miles Kennedy, and you know, they has to say the whole thing, and he's like, Jesus, can I just say Slash? Because even when I'm appearing at things, and people, you know, so, you know, sometimes they'll be like, do you want us to say from Slash featuring Miles Kennedy, this Conspirators? Sometimes I just go, you know, just say from Slash. I play with Slash. That's really all that, you know, that's really kind of enough. So sometimes I just kind of, you know, if they want to say the whole name, great. But you know, because it's usually from the Age of Electric and Heroes and Monsters. You know, it's like I just kind of like at a certain point, it's kind of enough already.
That's funny. I appreciate that story. And there are bands usually like the screamo that's like a whole sentence,
yeah,
you know, kind of thing. But no, I was just curious.
Do you remember a band back in the early 2000s called and You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead?
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, Trail of Dead was sort of like what they ended up kind of getting abbreviated to, but I was always kind of like, now that is hilarious. Like, like just because the fact was you couldn't, just coming up with, like, the Conspirator is just bizarre that there's not like 1,000 Conspirator bands. Of course, now that we live in a day of conspiracy theories, it's a whole other thing. People would be like, you know, often people, so you guys are the Conspirators, you know, do you guys ever like talk about conspiracy theories? And I'm like, oh God, not really. No, it's kind of, yeah. It's like, no, we weren't named that because we're like these guys that are talking about like
flat earthers.
Yeah, not all that crazy stuff. I was kind of like, no, we just kind of thought it was a cool name. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And so, yeah, it just doesn't roll off the tongue as easy, but you're right. You can't mistake it for anything else.
But it is funny to have SMKC. It's like CBGBs is like country, bluegrass, and blues. You know, the fact that it became a punk rock bar is hilarious. That CBGBs, like that logo, and we all know that logo. So my intention was, well, then eventually, hopefully, SMKC just becomes kind of like this, like Kiss on a T-shirt, just SMKC. And within our group, in our crowd, I think that you know, people know that, and they don't really question it. It's sort of like it sort of happened again organically. That's Slash. Oh, now it's Slash featuring Miles Kennedy. Now it's Slash featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators, which started off as just me and Fitz, and then eventually we had Frank. So it's, you know, my thoughts were that, you know, maybe someday there will just be a Slash and the Conspirators. I have no idea. You know, it depends on what ends up happening in the future with everybody's stuff. I don't know. You know, it's sort of a fun thing to imagine that you know, well, regardless of everything, you know, it's like Slash will, long after I've gotten, you know, I have a feeling that I'll be like old and like on the couch, and I'll realize, and I'd be like, Slash coming through. I'll be like, Slash is coming through town. How can he be coming through town? He's older than me. Yeah.
It's like that South Park episode.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a testament to his, what was his name on that? Slash and
Bundeslash.
Bundeslash.
Yeah.
It was a testament to his work ethic. You know, it was sort of making fun of the fact that how can he be at this thing and also be here and also be making music. It's like, it's sort of like that. He's sort of like I always tell the stories of how, like, I'll get a text from him saying, hey, you want to get together on Friday, or, you know, or maybe 2 weeks from now or whatever. And I'll be like, yeah, sounds good. And then I'll realize after the fact that I'll look at dates and realize he's flying in from South Africa like the day before. And I'm like, I remember Slim Jim Phantom and the Stray Cats going, doesn't he ever want to just go home and pet the dog? And I go, no, not really. I think there's something to be said about his completely, you know, like he sort of like looks at his schedule and goes, here's a window of opportunity. What can I do in there? You know, it's like, And I think, and I've learned a lot from that. Like people say to me all the time, like, how busy I am. I go,
Right.
I think a lot of that rubbed off from Slash, where it was kind of like, well, if I love doing this. I love playing music. I love doing stuff. Like even like doing this now with you is kind of like, well, we're talking about it. I mean, it's sort of like it's a very sort of self-serving, childish way of like, I only want to do things that I want to do. And
Well, that should be life is. That's what it should be
yeah,
about. So if
yeah,
it makes him happy, I mean, more power to him.
absolutely, yeah. And that's the thing is he's managed to, and again,
And healthy.
He's healthy and he's not. That's a lot of it too. I think is a good way to kind of keep your mind working, keep your creativity juices flowing, and all that kind of stuff. I think it's all just healthy, positive stuff. Yeah.
And so speaking of SMKC, not just S&M. So obviously people are excited to hear from you. So I have questions for you. This is from my friend Satya Mortha, a fellow Canuck like you. When is the next album coming out? Any chance he'll sing lead vocals on an album track?
Well, that would be awesome. I mean, we've always entertained that. I mean, the fact that they, when I was originally hired, if that's the word for it, filled the position. It was just sort of to be the bass player, and then I sort of like, as we were doing the songs, especially the solo material at that time, there's lots of harmonies and lots of things that are going on. And I just sort of started picking those up. And it became kind of like, it wasn't really until like the, conversation about doing Dr. Alibi, Lemmy, or the Iggy Pop song that they sort of went like, do you want to sing this? Because Miles just kind of felt like Iggy Pop was kind of like out of his wheelhouse, and I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds like fun. So that, and although Lemmy would get up with us on occasion back then when he was still with us, it became part of the kind of, well, let's go do that. And it became sort of my signature song in a weird way.
I think that's why he wants to know. Right.
Yeah, it's such a great honor because, I mean, like, because Lemmy's such a huge part of why I do this. And then, yeah, I mean, honestly, as far as the next record, we are always sort of looking for these windows of opportunity. And I can honestly say we don't have anything nailed down just yet. But, if we can, it'd be great. Slash every once in a while, go, we got to get you to sing a song on a record. I'm like, yeah, okay. But it's sort of like, it's not something that I really, I have to admit that it's so much fun just being in that band, and I feel very busy. I mean, it's not like I feel like I'm not doing enough. I mean? It's like I'm sort of like constantly at the microphone with Miles, and then I'm I'm also trying to hold down my parts and all that kind of stuff. And people know that I love being on stage and interacting with the audience. So to me, it's kind of it's like all the boxes are checked. Being able to sing a song, obviously when I'm doing Heroes and Monsters or Blackbird Angels or basically Duke, any of the things that I do, I'm singing all the time. I'm sort of the lead singer. So it sort of becomes, I have that itch gets scratched for sure, but it'd be great. It'd be great to do one with them. I think, we've always entertained the idea of a Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale, Deep Purple Mark III kind of era type thing where Glenn would sing parts of songs and stuff like that. I go, I mean, whatever. I'm game. Back when we were recording with Elvis was always a big supporter of mine, and Elvis Pasquette, the producer.
Yeah.
So he was always kind of like, trying to find places to put my voice. It's the World on Fire, my parts and all that kind of stuff. And so who knows? It's really, I'm kind of open to whatever. I've taken my paddle out of the water a long time ago and just let the river take me where it's going to take me.
It's working out for you
within reason.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, sometimes you gotta get your strokes in there.
Get away from those rocks. Yeah.
But this you do know because it has been announced that there's going to be another tour. There's shows, right? So
yeah.
This is from James Patrick. Do you know when the North American tour is going to start? Do you know that?
That I don't. I don't really know. Well, first of all, it's still kind of all kind of coming together, and I really don't know what I'm allowed to talk about. So I mean, hopefully we're going to go out and do a bunch of stuff in the new year, and but I can't really even guess where and what and how long. And I'm assuming that we'll get back to as many places as we can. I mean, the fact that we did America in 2022 it's sort of like, it sort of feels like it came off the table, and I'm kind of like, but that was, that will be 2 years ago. Once 2024 is on our plate, which, by the way, 2024 suddenly makes it 14 years of playing with Slash and
Wow.
Miles and Brent Fitz. But it's sort of, yeah, it's just sort of, I'm hoping that it will kind of get us a chance to go, around the world and hopefully see everybody that we can. It's always a little bit of a bummer because every time you announce dates, the first people who go, seriously, no Cleveland, or whatever. Yeah. There's always it. And you're like, oh, it just breaks your heart. And it happens in every single thing that I do. Like, and I always go like, our Canadian band Took is massively popular right in the Midwest of the country with the prairies, and doesn't really get to the Los Angeles and New York, the Vancouver and Toronto of Canada as much. And people are always like, and I'm like, we don't book the gigs. I'm not an agent, I'm the musician. It's like, we need promoters and that kind of stuff to chase these things down. So sometimes when you don't make it to whichever given town or whichever given territory, it's just because that's just the way the cookie crumbled, and promoters or agents or whatever just couldn't make it happen. And that's, but you only know that when you kind of do what I do. It's sort of like you see tours come together, and we often ask, well, can we get over here? And it's like, well, A, B, or C, and you kind of go, okay, and you just make the best of it. It's funny to me because in Europe, we see, like, often the front row of our shows will be the same people almost every night, like from the UK all the way down to Italy. It's like,
wow,
through the Netherlands and all the way down. It'll be like, it'd be familiar faces the whole time, people who travel with the whole band. And that is very, so sometimes when I, it's sort of like you want to say, isn't it only an hour drive to the other show we're playing? I'm sorry we're not getting to your town, but people in Europe will take a train for 8 hours to come see us play. Not that I'm asking anybody that feel like anybody should do that. I'm not going to do that. At this point, I'm at that age now where it's kind of like, well, what's the parking like? It's 10 minutes from my house, and I'm like, well, okay, well, but that's just me being a grumpy old man, I guess.
I'm the same way, and I just turned 40, so you may do a spit take right there that I feel old. But so, and I realize that, having spoken to a lot of Guns N' Roses fans on this podcast, that have waited years and years to see GNR or even just Slash, and I understand how lucky I am growing up and living in New York and having all these shows available, and that it's at times it's a double-edged sword, because I'll be like, oh, I'll catch them next time around, and
of course, yeah,
and sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Like, I always kept saying that about Tom Petty. Now I can't.
Oh, me too, dude. That is one of my greatest regrets.
Soundgarden. Oh God, you never saw
Prince is another one. Yeah.
So I will, because I have not seen you guys. I'm kind of I don't know. I must have been working or where I was, because I really wish I saw you at Pier 17, which is a great venue.
Good one.
I saw Ringo Starr there. I made sure my wife and I to go see Ringo's.
Is that the one by like? I'm trying to think which one that is.
On a rooftop.
Yeah. No, that was that night. We had like like Rick from The Walking Dead was there. What's his name? The actor?
Andrew Lincoln.
Andrew Lincoln, and he was like fucking awesome, dude. Like he's like super stoked to be there, and like him and his wife, and it was just right around when he had been like, just, I think, the tail end of his run on the show. And there was this really cool part where we were playing, it's like, it's rocking out, and there was sort of like on, I guess, stage left, so to the right of the audience was like a sort of cordoned off beer area or alcohol area. And I remember like going over there, and like there's a whole crowd in there, and I just did one of these kind of like, yeah, and the whole audience went, yeah, and I just saw Andy Lincoln go, he had a beer in his hand, and he just went like this, like, yeah. And I was like, I didn't even notice him there until he raised his beer, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. And it was also Shaun of the Dead. Oh, these names are escaping me.
Simon Pegg.
Simon Pegg was there. It was a very interesting night. Yeah, my wife was like, I didn't even know, and my wife was like, we were sitting side stage with Simon Pegg. I go, what? I didn't even see him. But it was like one of those bizarre nights where it was like, I think maybe Norman Reedus was there too. I don't remember, but it
Oh
was like, you know,
man.
it's New York, right? So it's kind of like anything can happen. But we've been in New York many times. One of the earliest shows we played was in some of the earliest stuff we did was in New York. But we did Howard Stern. We did a CD release at some small place in the Village. I can't remember, but yeah, no, it's one of my favorite places in the world. New York.
It will happen. So if you are in New York or Long Island, I'm gonna take Baby Brownstone. He's
Perfect.
for his first rock concert, because now
Brownie.
that he's been experienced, because we didn't take him to Metallica, way too young.
Hmm.
Guns N' Roses, I'm like, we can't. He's still, again, he's not five. He's about 5 months.
Right. Yeah.
And my wife went to Seattle recently to go to the Gorge to see
Oh.
Dave Matthews, because
Oh,
she
cool.
is more obsessed with than I am with GNR. Like,
We've played the Gorge. We played the Gorge. Duff McKagan got up on stage with us.
How beautiful! I haven't been there. Like,
It's
beautiful.
yeah, it's insane. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, that's another one. But you just got to get those big headphones. You know, when you're a kid. My kids, when they were small, had big headphones. You know.
So yeah, he did. So she went with her friends.
She brought him. Okay.
Yeah, but he wasn't like really planned for him to go. Like, he was gonna stay back with her sister. But then one night, the sister came down, being like, "Let's just go back in the field. Let's just see how he is." He's got the headphones. He was fine. Then he went closer, and he's fell asleep. And I mean, I would fall asleep during Dave. I have fallen asleep during Dave Matthews. But it's
yeah, I have to admit, I'm not as familiar with Dave, other than, like, I mean, back in the day, he was unavoidable because he was always on the radio. But
my life, he's unavoidable. Now, I'll tell you this: it might be it is good. She just bought the tickets. My first trip to London, next year, because
really?
Dave Matthews is playing London. So it's under the guise of it's our belated honeymoon.
That's great.
So let's go to London to see Dave Matthews.
I think it's awesome, though. You know, it's like when you know, somebody has a passion for something, even though you don't get it. You know, it's kind of like,
I admire it.
I'm not a huge sports guy, so it's kind of like, you know, my friends with Green Bay Packers shit all over their house. I'm like, whatever, dude. If you're into it, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were a Golden Knights fan, or is that just being a Vegas?
Well, of course. I mean, well, I'm Canadian, so I have to like hockey. I also like the Lakers, but
right.
It's kind of one of those things where it's, you know, it's like I'm not. I have so many friends that days are made and broken by how their team's doing. What the hell's the matter with him? Oh, the Toronto Maple Leafs are losing. I'm like, dude, you're not on the Toronto Maple Leafs. You'll be okay, you know, or whatever. But it's you know, a Canadian thing that the Knights is a fever that swept over this city that just it's just fascinating to have witnessed in real time, to have been here as long as I have.
Yeah,
you know, the idea of having a hockey team, let alone the Raiders, and now maybe the A's, you know, baseball team,
right,
is like, you know, would have just been like a non-versation. That'll never happen. We can't have teams here, you know. But, you know, the fact that we are 6 years later having, you know, won the Stanley Cup is, and I was there. My wife and I.
Oh, you went? Yeah.
Right on ice level, Knights End, win the cup. It was a big deal.
Wow.
So a lot of my Canadian friends are they give me a hard time, because it's kind of like, you know, like as if I've jumped ship to be a Golden Knights. I'm like, that's not really the case. And then I always sort of point out that there was a stat that said there were more Canadians on the Golden Knights than any other team in the NHL.
Right.
So I was kind of like, I don't know what to tell you, bro. That kid's from Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan's where I'm from. That's what this is, the Saskatchewan Roughriders from Canadian Football League, of which I never followed Canadian football, but I don't, you know, it's such a huge American phenomenon that American football is such a huge, you know, now we have the Allegiant Stadium. I've not been to a game, but I saw the Giants play. We did a show at Giant Stadium when they opened Giant Stadium. Geez, I don't even remember where that was, but it was SMKC with Jason Bonham and Nicole from the Pussycat Dolls. We played out in the parking lot. It was very bizarre. And then, yeah, but we only got to do like one or two songs, and all of a sudden there was lightning and stuff, and they shut us down.
Oh,
I don't even think we ended up on television, because I've never seen that footage anywhere. But it was like Jason was going to get up and play "A Whole Lot of Love" or something like that, and Nicole was going to sing. I think she was going to sing "A Whole Lot of Love." Actually, I think she was going to sing "A Whole Lot of Love," and it didn't happen. Next thing I knew, we were in a box watching the Giants with Matt Sorum, who just happened to be there, and Mike Myers, the actor. The Canadian actor. I never got a chance to talk to him, but
I should have kept track of all the names you're dropping throughout this entire.
Yeah,
I love it though, because you're so humble about it. And these are all your friends, and it's just like these big names before you're, eating dinner with Sebastian Bach and Stephen Piercy, and now you talk. It's just I love it. And again,
that was the first time I ever met Matt Storm. I remember him saying, people keep telling me we should have tried you out for Velvet Revolver. I go, well, too late now, bro. Yeah.
I don't know. You could.
I love Matt. Matt's he's a great dude, and I love listening to him when he throws down. I always tell him my favorite drumming of his was on a thing called Neurotic Outsiders with I just love his kind of like straight up just four on the floor kind of thing. And Steve Jones, John Taylor, Duff McKagan. It was a super group. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That song Good News still lives in my head. I
broke out broke it out the other day and just was driving around going, I forgot how much I love this record.
Yeah, Matt Storm. I'm lucky enough to have also had him on this podcast, and he's always super nice. He gave me baby swaddling advice before I had my kid. He's like, you got to use the double swaddle. I mean, we're past that now, but just the fact that he's so kind about that.
Oh yeah. Does he have? Is his book out?
Yeah.
I got to get that. I love reading rock books. It's gotten bizarre now because you start to kind of go, you start to know people, and you're like, oh, okay. Reading Sebastian's book, and you're like, I know this cat. It's so weird, but yeah, it's but it's funny to me because it's like, it does feel kind of like sometimes you feel like you're dropping names, and I'll just be kind of like sitting there with my friends back home, and they'll bring something up, and I'll be like, oh yeah, we did download with those guys. They're really cool, and you almost kind of feel like I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm just sort of saying
no.
My like the other day somebody brought up Norm Macdonald, and I go, they said I saw Norm Macdonald in a small club in Toronto, or no, it was in Salt Lake or something like that. And I go, oh, cool. I ran into him at the Hard Rock upstairs in the hotel and just had a quick chat with him and got a photo. And it's like, I didn't know Norm Macdonald. I just sort of had a,
all
quick
Canadians
interaction
don't know each other. Okay.
But it started like that. It was me like, hey, Norm, I'm Canadian. He goes, no way. How are you? It's like that kind of thing. You immediately just start like, it just sort of always starts that way. Sometimes it works.
He posted.
Yeah. It was he was so cool. And I was like, dude, can we do a quick photo? And he's like, click. And then we're gone. It's funny because my friends played in a band called the New Pornographers from Vancouver. And they played Letterman a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And they said they could never pull the Canadian card on Paul Schaefer. They'd say, hey, Paul, we're from Canada. They'd be like, good for you. And he would just keep walking. He probably hears that every day. I'll tell you. But usually that's a pretty good in. Guys like me and Sebastian and different guys who grew up in Canada, we just always have this sort of subtext of stuff we can refer to that no one else knows what the hell we're talking about. So
it always Tim works. Hortons, Canadian Tire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The fact that you know what Canadian Tire is bizarre.
Only reason I do is because I dated a girl from Ottawa.
I think you mentioned this before.
Yeah, the Saskatchewan, because her mom was a fan, and
sure,
I mean, this was years ago.
She must have been from Saskatchewan, because Saskatchewan is it's the only national team we have is a Canadian football team, so it is massive there. And if they play in Ottawa, half that crowd will probably be in green jerseys supporting the Saskatchewan team. It's so bizarre because so many people kind of like move on to other places, but still hold on to that.
Yeah, and while I'm a sports guy, I left the whole live and die thing in like college. I can't live my life like that anymore, especially being like an Islanders fan. They're always terrible. Knicks fan, they're always terrible.
Well, they were gods, but what's the real bizarre part is when you're sitting watching a game and you realize I could be all of these guys' dad.
I feel like that now. Oh no, yeah.
That's what I mean.
I've always been the young guy. Now
there came a point where you're like, you're looking up to these guys as a kid, like, these guys are gods. And then one day you're like, I finally went and saw a Lakers game because it was always been a dream of mine to go to I refuse to call it the crypto.com center or whatever they call it. It's always going to be Staples Center.
Yeah.
And, I just, my whole life, I'm one of those people who's always busy, always doing stuff. I'm always missing shows, like all those shows we talked about missing. I would have to book time off to go see something like Prince. It was like, I would love to have seen Prince, but I never got a chance to. But then I was like, I want to go see my wife, for my birthday last year. We just went to Staples Center and watched the Lakers lose to the Celtics. And it was a big deal to me. Like, it's like, my whole life, I always looked up to, I actually started with Kareem as a kid. through Bruce Lee, oddly enough, on the Game of Death. That was my fight. Who's this giant praying mantis of a human? Because I was a giant praying mantis of a human, and I was kind of like, really connected with him. But and I was just kind of like, but I'm also like I say, I'm not one of those guys. It's like, I don't follow it. You know what's amazing? Frank Sidoris never knew what hockey was 10 years ago or whatever, and now is like knows every stat about everything about the Las Vegas or Vegas Golden Knights, and it's awesome to see because like I've never followed anybody as intently as he follows the Vegas Golden Knights. He's even like on the big screen playing an opening song at the hockey arena when you go. It's like so cool.
And how's Frank doing? I know he's cool health wise. I know he had that accident like a little while ago.
He's great. Yeah. His wife went through some stuff and then they got in a car accident and it was just like, oh man, but they've been great since. I mean, Frank is one of my favorite people in the world, and he's been out with Wolfgang for a couple of years maybe now, or maybe at least over a year. It's over a year anyway. And
because I've seen Frank with Wolfgang. I've seen which is cool.
Oh yeah, with Guns N' Roses, yeah. Great.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. And before I forget, because we mentioned it earlier, I don't want to escape. You were in Steven Adler's band. I don't know if you still are in Steven Adler's, because when Tanya
I was never really in the band. That's what's so funny is people get, so you're playing with Steven now. I go, I've been filling in because Tanya, what was she doing? She went on to do something. She does this. She's pretty amazing. She does I'm also vegan, but I'm actually what I call veggie, because I never really was the kind of, that vegan thing seems so new school, but when she does this whole thing where she was like doing a documentary series about veganism, her and the singer for Sepultura. They have this whole thing they do together. And so she was off doing this thing. And I was like, yeah, I'll fill in. Sure. Sounds great. I know all those songs. It's like I've done Guns N' Roses songs my whole life. And obviously it was my gig. So stepping in with Steven was great because I know Steven. I've always, known him, but I didn't really know him that well. But this new version of the band is real solid, really great guys. AJ's an old friend of mine. Michael Thomas is an amazing guitar player. And Ari is ridiculous. He does this young Axl thing that's nuts. You're like, it's pretty bizarre. And then I just did some fly out weekend stuff and had a blast doing it. It was that was the first stuff I did after COVID. It was like the first show I ever played after COVID was a fly out New Jersey. I think it was Jersey, somewhere back east anyway. Just some sort of festival type thing outside with Slaughter and Vixen. It was pretty fun, actually. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I just had Janet Gardner on the show not too long ago. Oh, well, I know she's not Vixen anymore, but she is Vixen.
I just watched that documentary with her in it. It's great.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It was great. I gotta ask, and this is I'm glad some of my listeners asked as well. From Gilbert Cano, how are your cats doing?
Good. There's two in here right now, but I don't want to bother them.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so we had three of our own. I mean, the funny thing is years, over the years, I was just like, I can't have pets because we travel so much. My wife, at least has the option to be like, she's going to fly to France and catch up with me on tour or whatever. So the whole idea was like having a pet would have just meant like, which is too, well, we're in that boat now. But at the time I was like, I don't think we could do this properly. And then one day, just in the middle of COVID, this cat walked through our front door, and I was like, whose cat is this? She was really friendly and really nice. And we were like, okay. So we sort of sussed out the neighbors, and no, not our cat. And we couldn't find one to take her to the vet and make sure she's okay and all that stuff. And there was no one claimed her. So we had found, initially found someone who could take her, and then just decided, well, what are we doing? We're not doing anything right now. So we kept her. And then I remember every time my wife would go to get the mail, the cat would like be screaming, like, I'm like, she's gone. She's coming right back. Like 30 seconds, so we kind of got this sort of thing of like, well, she doesn't seem to be separated. So my wife just came across another, adoption, and we adopted a second guy, and then we found a third guy. And we were like, okay, that's it. 3 cats is, because the third guy was wild. Like, he makes these current kittens we have now all put together weren't as wild as he was, and still kind of is. And then we just found this cat in our neighborhood. And my wife, being the good soul that she is, was out feeding this stray cat that just sort of like was on the path to, our local grocery store. We would just kind of like come across this cat all the time. And she was friendly enough that I feel like she was abandoned or got lost, or, you just never know. Because feral cats, you barely will register there. And there's a whole feral community in Vegas. That's a whole other conversation, but feral cats usually are just like, they don't want anything to do with you. But she was friendly enough, and that we assumed that she was, the apartment building right there. I go, maybe it's somebody here. We took her. We had to basically catch her in a thing, take her to the vet, make sure she's okay, see if she's chipped, all that stuff, to try and see if we can find where she came from or where she can go. Now, long story short, she turned out to be pregnant. So we were like, and I remember being kind of like, okay, so what do you do about that? And they're kind of like, well, as far as we're concerned, when you bring the cat in, it's your cat. Like, we don't have the facility to just take cats. It's like, that's a whole SPCA Humane Society kind of thing. And I was like, and I remember thinking, like, the SPCA and the Humane Society, those seem like the kind of places you take a cat, and they put them down or whatever they do. So we just said, okay, well, we immediately turned our office into her cat sanctuary, because she's a little bit feral. She was a little bit kind of, she could go off. But she got so much, like, she chilled out, and it took a couple weeks, but then she had 4 kittens. So in our house, we had 8 cats in our house.
Wow.
So we had her shut away. We had them all kind of closed away because she didn't interact with our cats very well at all, which is to be understood. Most grown animals are kind of like, especially when she's pregnant or she has kittens, she's sort of like in protective mode.
Sure.
Anyway, whole thing. And then, now we've had these guys for 14 weeks. Is it going on 15 weeks? This one's Birdie. We're keeping her. She is the last one.
Aww. Aww.
Look at how she's just frozen solid, aren't you? Hi, how are you? She's the funniest one, because she was the last one born, and we were there for the whole process. My wife wakes me up, kind of like, she's having them, and I'm like, I'm not a doctor. What am I supposed to do? Anyway, so we go in, and she had 4 kittens, and the last one was Birdie. And she was, the mother gives birth. It's a whole, just, the whole primal aspect of watching that whole and witnessing it. I've seen my children born, which is another return to the cave kind of experience of like, wow, we might be in a hospital right now and there might be lights and doctors here, but this is, totally nuts. The whole human, the just nature experience is just kind of like, wow.
I went through it for the first time. Exactly. I did not look. I did not watch.
No, dude, I did. I was like, I have to kind of witness this entire thing. But anyway, so she came out, Birdie came out, and there's a, and it's a whole graphic story of how the mother was so tired that we didn't know if she was even going to be able to kind of like, so I helped kind of like, it wasn't reviving her, just sort of getting the sack off of her and sort of all that. Anyway, so long story short is that we have given one to our tour manager, Cheryl. I don't know if you know Cheryl, but she works with Slash and Blondie and Billy Talent and Journey and all kinds of bands. Anyway, so she has one of them. It's been tough for us because we had, initially a lot of people were very, interested, and when you foster, you kind of, you can't help but get attached. You just get really attached, and then it's like,
that's why I don't want to do.
We got to give these guys away now. It's like, so we have 2 right now who are, meant to be going to a friend of ours, and it's not easy, honestly. So, but now we have 4 technically. We technically have 6 in the house because of the other 2 are meant to be going to a friend of ours. But we've kept them this long because it just sort of turned into this, turned into that. Now we want to get the vaccinations done for them. So now here we are, and we have just a house full of insanity.
Are you still selling those? You were making T-shirts, right?
Yeah, we've decided to kind of continue. I mean, it all depends on how things go. But we were just at a place yesterday, talking about fostering, beyond. My wife has during all of this came across two other kittens that while I was away on a Heroes and Monsters tour, she fostered two other kittens as well as, so there was 10 cats in the house at one point. And but fostered them, got them in their forever home, and it's been something that, like I say, like we weren't going to have pets at all to suddenly now it's become our whole life. The Kerns Kitten Academy, we call it, helping to kind of get the cats healthy and strong. And these are very healthy, very strong. You try to like get them accustomed to being around humans so that when they go to live with somebody, it's not like you're just, here's your insane, terrified animal. Good luck with that. But it's like I say, it's like not something I ever would have foreseen because, but it's been a real, it's a rewarding thing for sure, and it's a huge part of my day. Like all day now, it's kind of like, hey buddy, you get up and they're a constant state of, doses of, constant doses of dopamine throughout my day, like having a good time with him or her. And it's sort of like, it's not something I ever would have, everybody's kind of like, they pat you on the back for being such a good person. It's just kind of like, I honestly don't know where this all came from and how it just came about. But my wife and I were not like about to walk away and go like, well, this cat's clearly like, and going through the after we finally got her in the house, and the mother of the cats, we've placed her now too with a friend of ours, and she's nuts. She's borderline feral, but she's awesome. She was an awesome cat. But in the course of like getting her in the house and having the kittens here, this Vegas summer happens. I'm like, how would they have survived in this? And then all of a sudden there was a flood. We had terrible rains a few weeks ago, and I'm like, oh, this is, I can't imagine that these 5 animals that we moved into our house, I don't know that they would have made it, if we didn't do that. So we like to pat ourselves in the back and hopefully think that we've done some good in all this.
No, you are doing great work. My wife will be scrolling on TikTok or Instagram and be like, look at this cat. Let's foster some cats. And I said exactly what you said. I will get way too attached.
I know.
And I just can't.
It's hard.
I can't go through it. I mean, now with the baby, that's just, I'm giving logical reasons. But the main thing I'm thinking of is I will become attached, because I was not a cat person until I met my wife, and the cats we have are older. At one point we had 3, 1 passed, and the 2, they're 16 and 17. They act like
wow.
Kittens. They act like kittens though. They sleep with me. It's incredible. So the fact that I'm so attached to these older cats that I didn't grow up with them, and it's just like I don't even want to think about. In my head, I'm like, they're gonna live until 40. I'm like, I know that's the way I'm thinking.
You're eventually like, I hadn't had a pet since I had a dog, and he passed, very unexpectedly, probably 10 years before we ever came across getting this cat thing together again. But it was so devastating that it was just kind of like, so the self-preservation of it becomes kind of like, I can't give my heart to something like this, because it's eventually going to, but if everything goes according to plan, I'm going to outlive all of these animals, you know what I mean? Yeah. Unless something unexpected happens, but you're basically buying yourself future heartache. But I guess and any pet owner will tell you that what you get out of it is better than all that. So I mean, it's funny to me because probably objectively, I thought maybe we'll get a dog, someday. But this is just the way it happened. Like it literally was a cat walked through the front door one day, and then we got to get her a friend because she doesn't really like to be alone. And now here we are. So it's kind of like, and it's a great place to be. Yeah.
It represents, and that's how I look at it now. Like this is just a really special moment in my life and times in my life. And I appreciate it. I'm trying to live in the moment where
totally,
not projecting and like worrying about the future. I'm just like, all right, let me appreciate them right now. This is great. And I'm sorry, I know we're going a little overtime, but I would be remiss because we spoke about this before we started recording, and you were given some good professional advice about like booking shows, right? Like, why not Cleveland? This. So I wanted to get your, somebody who's toured around the world, different bands. So since my last episode, which has been a couple weeks, Guns N' Roses canceled their show in St. Louis. Now, this is very easy for clickbait, because of the infamous 1991 Riverport riot, and Axl and the fuck St. Louis t-shirts that, again, 30 years ago. They've played St. Louis since. I think 2017 was a successful return. And it was reported, I mean, we all think it's Axl, but it wasn't said that somebody was ill. But then you can see all the rumor and Monday morning quarterbacking about ticket sales, and does he really hate St. Louis? And I just, it's frustrating, I think, for a fan. And I don't think I am looking at this through Guns N' Rose colored glasses.
Well played.
Thank you. And you could tell me if this is true. Some artists get paid regardless of how many tickets are sold. Like, I don't think it matters that they're getting paid the same whether they sell out or not. So I don't know if ticket prices or how many were sold even matters. And people get sick, like it happens, and this is not like a constant thing. Like I can't even count on one hand the amount of shows that they've canceled since reuniting.
And it's funny to me because it's like, it's not like here in Vegas, I have a million friends who play in acts here in Vegas, in like, whether it's like the backing band for a Blue Man Group or whatever. And when Dave gets sick, they call Mike to come fill in. It's not like Axl Rose is sick, so let's get, I don't know, some guy. It's like, that's not how that works. If anybody gets sick in the band and like sick enough that, they can't really perform, then you just can't perform. It's funny because when that was brought up to me the other day when I was in New Jersey, and it was sort of like, Guns N' Roses canceled, and I was kind of like, okay, a canceled show is super normal in the course of, if they've met 99% of their, commitments as far as shows go, the odd canceled show, it doesn't seem like any cause for alarm. But it wasn't until somebody brought up, St. Louis, and you're kind of like, oh, right, okay. It's hard to forget about that because, I've had personal conversations one-on-one with so many of the guys that were there. And it's a traumatic, story. Like, it's not a, to us, it's a wacky piece of rock and roll history. Sorry, Brando.
That's okay. That's okay.
Oh, did I lose you? There you
go.
No. But it's not, to them, it was, was awful, I mean? And,
yeah.
And it sounds awful, it doesn't sound like anything I'd want to be, to have lived through. But, yeah, I never really took it as anything as just sort of like, oh, well, somebody was sick. Okay. I accept that as the reasoning. I've never, the only time I ever had to cancel a show was I've had both eyes. I've had, retinal surgery. So, I had a show booked here in Vegas that I had to cancel, and it sucked. Like, it was just like, but I have a show, and they were kind of like, yeah, well, you have to go into surgery. And you're like, but I have a show. Yeah. And you're like, but I don't, in my mind is always like, kind of like, it's all about like even once in a while, some friend will be like, they'll have a cold and they'll be like, oh man, you can tell their voice is all jacked up just talking to you. My initial thought is kind of like, how are you going to play a show? How are you going to sing? And I'm like, this person isn't even a singer, but it's sort of like my immediate thoughts are just kind of like the show, it's everything is about playing the concert. So when it happens, it sucks. And no one's super thrilled about like just the other day here in Vegas, Ed Sheeran was meant to play at the Allegiant Stadium football stadium.
Mm-hmm.
And they had loaded everybody into the goddamn place and canceled the show. And that sucks. Hey, Brownie.
Baby Brown's still making an appearance. Look at this
you.
guy. Little monkey man.
I like the monkey shirt. Yeah.
Yeah. Looks like me.
That's great.
But no,
Yeah. Well,
I hear you.
now my little dude like that. My daughter is getting married in February. So there you go.
Mazel
That's
tov.
how. That's how. I would like. I'd like to point out she's a grown up. She's not like 12
Not a
getting married.
baby.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, this guy's
But
gonna be about 5 months.
it's crazy, man. And I remember that plain as day. And it's like, when I think back, like to my kids being that small, it does seem like a long time ago. But it also feels like not that long ago.
Hmm.
It's like,
Well,
getting the Little Mermaid or Free Willy on VHS tape back then, watching,
oh, we're currently I'm having him watch the original Blues Clues, not the ones with
So with
Joe or
Steve,
whatever. No, with Steve.
yeah,
That's the
yeah,
one.
that's what my kids watched. Yeah,
And he watches it. No, he loves it. Um,
as he should.
yeah, and
It's a classic.
I hope you get to meet him because again, I want to go see you guys live. It's
Absolutely,
enough.
yeah. Well, if we get to your neck of the woods, then we'll have to have you guys come out and bring the boy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When's his
'Cause
birthday?
April
When's he born?
26th. April
Okay,
26th. Yeah.
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So just it's
Spring
episode
baby.
4. Yeah, Spring Baby was all my friends were like, he should be born on 420. What do you
It's so
thought?
funny, yeah, because this is your 420, and I'm kind of like, man, I am so grown up. I was just having this conversation the other day about how I have all these these couples and people that I know who are in their 40s and 50s who are like, yeah, we're gonna get some mushrooms, and I'm like, what? Who are you people? We did all this in high school, and and I'm like, as a grown man, I'm like, no, dude, I'm like, I've been there.
Oh, I think because now it's legal, people think it's like they can go back, and now we can do it.
Well,
No, it's
and there's
moderation, man.
and there's all this stuff about like, you go on these trips and all these crazy things you're going to witness and experience together, and I'm like, you know what, I'm one of those people who's like, I'm perfectly cool where I'm at. I don't need any trips to
I did
go.
mushrooms once, and it just made me fall asleep.
Well, there
So
you go.
so yeah, now it's just like okay, when he goes to sleep, I'll smoke some legal marijuana in a different room, and
There you
just
go.
somebody else will be home, and I do it responsibly, and
And that's what I mean, that's what people are doing with the gummies and stuff, right? So it's all the same, the same effect, right? Like, what I mean?
it's funny though because like my brothers asked me, "What are you going to tell him though when he gets older about you smoking?" I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'll finally stop. But he's like, he's going to look at it differently because his entire life it's legal.
That's
I don't.
exactly it. It's going
I
to be
don't.
like drinking a beer, probably.
Yeah, maybe, but I mean,
Maybe,
people
yeah.
drink to excess. So I don't know. I'm already the overprotective Jew. I know I'm the father, but I'm the Jewish mother. Like I really am. I'm like, is he okay? He needs an extra jacket when he goes outside. This
This
was so cool, man. I know we could keep talking for a while because I can't believe you've only been on the podcast twice because it's like talking to an old friend. I know we
Yeah, well,
follow
we'll
each
do it
other
again.
on social,
It's a funny thing in the 21st century to be friends with people you don't actually get to see in person, but
right?
it's the nature of what life is like at this there you go.
He's a spitters.
Yeah.
He likes to
So
spit
yeah,
up.
yeah,
Oh, I
exactly. Yeah.
this is I used this word before for you. Wasn't this towel says this is dedicated to your daughter getting married. It says mazel, if I can get it up.
Mazel. There you
Uh,
go.
I have it upside down. I want to show it on Zoom and actually do it appropriately and hold on to a baby,
Yeah,
which
I
is
know. It's like, yeah, you're
proving to be
like
difficult.
multitasking.
It's there.
Mazel. I love it.
It's
I
there.
love
It's
it.
there. It wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth that whole few seconds of me
No,
trying
it
to
was.
unravel.
But when you make your $1 million Industrial Light and Magic edit, it'll work perfectly.
I leave it. I leave in my mistakes. I leave it. I
You
unless
have
it's
to. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Leave it
rock and
raw.
roll. I have to
Absolutely.
do it unless it's like really bad or I tell my guests and you were so cool and it didn't apply to you. If
I
there's
like that
anything
he
you
has
don't want to
he's
talk
kind of got
about,
he's got a straight up mohawk going on, which I appreciate.
he does. He
I love
does.
it. I
I've
love it.
asked. I've already asked my wife if is baby safe hair coloring just to give him like a mohawk. Oh,
And like the product to get it up.
I see. All right, this is the last thing I ask. I'll ask because obviously we're gonna want to make him a rock and roll baby. You know,
Sure.
your daughter's getting married. You know, you're not just a rock and roller. You got long hair. You got tattoos. You look the part. Do they look at you like dad, like a cool dad, or they look at you kind of like I
I
don't
think
know?
that
He
I
thinks he's
think
cool.
I think that we always use this quote because I remember one time my youngest I went to school to pick her up one day, and she just kind of said to me, she goes, "Why do you always have to be so cool?" And I took that to be like, because she's everything she says is hilarious, first of all. But when she said it, it kind of felt like all the other dads are coming in here in khakis and sweaters or polo shirts or whatever, being normal dudes picking up their kids, and you come in here, and I'm like literally like, what are you talking about? I didn't walk in with like a wind machine and like a fringe jacket. I was like literally in jeans and black jeans and a t-shirt.
Sure.
But I had tattoos and long hair or whatever. So I think she just kind of was like, you when they're young, they don't know. They just assume everybody's like you. Mm-hmm. And then they go through a phase where, they just get hip to it. Then I think there's a period where you're kind of not cool. I'll never forget when my kids started referring to music as dad rock, and I'd be like, ouch, slow down with that. And now they're on the other side, and they have tattoos and piercings and are, they're also, Vancouver West, it's a whole, thing. Like they grew up in a very, open, cool environment, and they're just kind of those people. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. It's been an interesting time of polarization, and I know people who even their children have become polarized from them politically and stuff like that, which I just don't understand, because my kids and I are so simpatico with everything we think. But it's like, it does happen. I mean, it's kind of like, when kids were long hair and, smoking weed, and mom and dad were super uptight, and sometimes it kind of goes the other way. So who knows? But I assume that you guys will be, he'll be, that's the thing about Rock and Roll Baby is a funny thing, because I have so many punk rock friends where it's like their kids are in like, jeans, Chucks, Ramones t-shirt, and I'm just kind of like laughing. Or a lot of the, Vans, skater community kind of people. Sure. And then their kids will be Mohawks and skateboard. And I'm like, it's just whatever you're into, your kids will probably be into. Doesn't mean they won't find their own thing, but it's, Guns N' Roses or whatever, your interest in Guns N' Roses, he will just be like, that's maybe super normal. And one day he'll be like, but that, to him, it'll be like talking about, like, I don't know, Benny Goodman Orchestra or something like that, because it'll be so long ago.
Yeah, maybe. And we'll see how long he wants to be a co-host as he grows up, and what he thinks about these videos when he's older. I'm like, Dad, why didn't you do that? Like, this isn't good radio. It is good radio. Well, Todd, thank you for being awesome. Thank you for being you. And
anytime.
Good luck with just everything that you're doing. And if people can find Todd Dammit Kerns on X, Twitter, Todd Kerns on Instagram. Yeah. That's the best.
That's right. Very good. You actually pulled them out. Yeah. ToddKerns.com is my website. So yeah, just come find me. I'm usually fairly engaging. I try to be. Yeah. I'm also like a grown ass man who doesn't necessarily respond to everything, because I'm, just distracted by cats.
Yeah.
And children and life.
I feel you. I'm the same way. I try to respond when I can. Otherwise, I'm with this dude. So anyway, exactly. That does it for this episode of Appetite for Distortion. When will you see the next one? In the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, I don't know if soon is the word, but you'll see it.